Welcome to Concordia Church today. We're glad you're here. If this is your first time joining us, text the word "new" online to 619-493-4001 so we can welcome you. Concordia loves to pray with and for you. Please text the word "prayer" to the same number, 619-493-4001, along with your prayer request, and we'll get right on it.
Hi, welcome to Concordia's online family worship. For those who are tuning in for the first time, let me introduce myself. My name's Richard. I'm the pastor here at Concordia. We're glad you're with us today. Today we're starting a book study. The book looks like Job, J-O-B. It's actually called Job. It's the story of a man whose life kind of got turned upside down, who had hurt after another, and how he works his way through that. I'm glad you're here to join us in that today. You'll see Alex, our family minister, come on and be sharing some activities that you can do together with your family at home. When we're worshiping in the same space here, we do several more of those different activities. Today what you'll see is we'll have a time of singing. We'll have a couple of those activities, and then you'll be seeing me talk for a really, really long time. When we're together in person, I'm going to be saying the same sort of things, but that time is going to be broken up by several different activities that help guide us into the message, to making it become more real and memorable and help us to be able to talk about it. Also, frankly, breaks up the message from one big long chunk into smaller, kid-friendly chunks. We think that's a really good thing. We think that enables families to be able to worship together in the same space. We hope that if you haven't checked us out before, when we're able to worship together again, that you check out our family worship at Concordia. I want to encourage you today to do this, to interact with the worship experience. There's a comment field if you're on Facebook, and I want to encourage you to leave a comment, to say hi to somebody, to ask a question, to leave a comment. I'll actually be there at the same time, and unlike when we're gathering in space and we're all in the same spot, and I can't stop the message in the middle, I can actually respond to a comment, and I'll be there commenting, responding to questions along with you. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that, and to take advantage of that opportunity to connect with other people at the same time. If you want to support us financially, if you're part of the Concordia family, that continues to be important for us at this time. I would encourage you to continue to give if God moves you to do so through one of our online platforms. Go to our website and click on the Give tab. That's concordiachurch.com. If you give automatically, continue that. You can also drop a check in the mail and we'll get that. If you're checking us out for the first time today, don't feel any obligation to give. That's something that the family does as part of family business, and to support work that God's given us to do here and throughout the world. Don't feel that obligation. But do understand that the time you're together, and it's probably about an hour and 10 minutes today, that's a gift that you're giving to God as well. There's going to be a number that came across the screen before. It'll come up at the end. You can text your name to that, and that's one way of saying, God, this time that I gave today was an offering to you. Another thing you can text to us is any prayer requests that you have. You can text the name prayer and then any requests you have to that number that you'll see as well. Before we started this series, we talked about fighting for joy. And one of the ways that we fight for our joy, even when the world's turned upside down, is by singing. God's Spirit connects with ours in a very special way when we do that. So whether it's one of you, or two of you, or 6 of you in the house, I want to encourage you to join us right now to fight for your joy, and let's sing.
With the sinner's restless Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough for me. Your grace is enough. Heaven reaches out to us. Your grace is enough for me. Your grace is enough. I'm covered in your love. Your grace is enough for me. I can see the waters raging at my feet. I can feel the breath of those surrounding me. I can hear the sound of nations rising up. We will not be overtaken. We will not be overcome. I can walk down this dark and painful road. I can face every fear of the unknown. I can hear all God's children singing out. We will not be overtaken. We will not be overcome. The same power that rose Jesus from the grave, the same power that commands the dead to wake, lives in us, lives in us. The same power that moves mountains when he speaks, the same power that can calm a raging sea, lives in us, lives in us. He lives in us, lives in us. We have hope that his promises are true. In his strength there is nothing we can't do. Yes, we know there are greater things in store. We will not be overtaken. We will not be overcome. The same power that rose Jesus from the grave, the same power that commands the dead to wake, lives in us, lives in us. The same power that moves mountains when he speaks, the same power that can calm the raging sea, lives in us, lives in us. He lives in us, lives in us. Greater is he that is living in me. He's conquered our enemy. No power of darkness, no weapon prevails. We stand here in victory. Greater is he that is living in me. He's conquered our enemy. No power of darkness, no weapon prevails. We stand here in victory. The same power that rose Jesus from the grave, the same power lives in us, lives in us. He lives in us, lives in us. Darkness, you were waiting without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To the Virgin came the word from the throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. For even in your suffering, you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. And the morning that he rose, all of heaven held its breath, till the stone was moved for good. For the Lamb had conquered death, and the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe. For the souls of those who'd come to the Father were restored, and the church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now his gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By his blood and in his name, in his freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Parker. I'm the Director of Family Ministries here at Concordia. And before we get into Pastor's sermon today, we have a little activity for you guys. So I'm going to give you guys a couple different situations. And for each one, I want you to say, either to yourself or with the people that you're watching this with, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does it hurt? All right, so 1 would be barely hurts at all, 10 being the most painful thing you could possibly think of. All right, so you're going to see those things up on the screen as I read them to you. And I encourage you, if you're in a group, to pause the video to give everybody a chance to say what they think and why it ranks the way it does. All right, so our first one is getting a paper cut. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does a paper cut hurt? And what about stubbing your toe? On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does stubbing your toe hurt? What about not being able to go to school? Not being able to see your friends? On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does it hurt not being able to see your friends? And what about having trips and activities canceled? How bad does that hurt? Well, the thing is, all of these things hurt to one degree or another, and maybe for different reasons. And today in Pastor's Message, and for the next couple weeks, Pastor's going to be talking about what the Bible has to say about when life hurts.
Sometimes life just hurts. Not all the time, but sometimes. That's pain, it seems, is just a part of life. Not a pleasant part, but a part of our human experience, no matter what your age. Now, sometimes it hurts a little bit like a pinch or a scratch. It's really painful at the time, but really not all that bad. In fact, sometimes you get so used to that kind of hurt that you don't even notice when it happens. It's kind of like me going out and doing yard work, and I come in and sometimes I'm all scratched up on my arms or in my face, and my wife says, "Where in the world did that come from?" And I'm like, I don't even know. I guess out in the yard somewhere. And sometimes the hurts we've got in life are like that, and other times the hurt's deeper, and the pain's stronger, and the effect's more lingering, and maybe some of you are in that kind of space right now, which is, how do I say it, challenging, both for you and for the people that you're living with. And then there are those times where the hurt just doesn't let up, and life seems to keep piling on, and suffering becomes your day-to-day experience. I remember the first time that I ever heard the book Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. We were on a band tour in college, and I think it was somewhere in Michigan. I don't remember that, but I remember this scene just very vividly still after all these years. The very young band director, she graduated from one of those Christian colleges like we were in, and she came out to greet us, and then she said, "I want to read you a book." And she read Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. And then she closed the book, and she just looked at us and said, "I've had a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, and a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week, and a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad month, and a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad year." And we're like, wow. I mean, what do you do with something like that? She was obviously like hurting in a really bad place. But even if we wanted to help, we didn't have any relationship with her, and we're just a bunch of dumb college kids. So what are we going to do with that? Well, it did stop and make me think. I mean, she was obviously in a lot of pain. And she was only a few years older than most of us were, and I couldn't stop wondering, what happened? What happened to that youthful idealism? What happened? What hurt so bad that caused her to just kind of spiral down? What happened to her faith? And I was like, could that be me? Could I really end up in a place where it hurts that bad for that long? Now, being a college kid, pretty much left it at that. Just that one brief moment of introspection, and then on to fun and whatever else I was thinking about, right? Because college kids are indestructible, but I'd never forgotten that moment. And one young Christian band director's pain, that life was really hurting. And it doesn't look like it was stopping anytime soon. And what I learned was that sometimes life can hurt that much. And sometimes the hurt can go on and on and on with no end in sight. And I've also learned that even when it doesn't hurt that much, the hurt is still hurt. Hurt's still hurt. And sometimes bearing the hurt is hard. Now, some of you are watching that in your house, this in your house with somebody else. And I want to encourage you just to hit pause right now and to just talk about that for a minute. No matter what your age, talk about, and don't just talk, but listen to each other about those places, those spaces where life hurts. Talk about things like, what are some of those moments? What are some of those disappointments? What are some of those pain points? How did that affect you? How does it feel? And if you're a believer, how did you feel about God when all that was going on? Go ahead, hit pause. Or put some of those things in the comment field and share that with the rest of us. What I want to do is zero in now on that last question I asked. How do you feel about God when life hurts? Do you curse God? Do you question God? Do you trust God? Do you vacillate in your feelings, going up and down kind of like a roller coaster? Do you struggle to reconcile with what you've come to believe about God is true with what you see going on in your life? And that terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day that you're seeming to experience in this particular space? The book that we're going to look at together, the title looks like Job, but it's actually pronounced Job. It's after the main character in the book. The book of Job wrestles with those sorts of questions and issues. And it explores some of those deep emotions that we feel in those times when life hurts and keeps on hurting. And rather than just leave us with some tweetable answers, it wrestles with those profound questions. And it kind of leaves us hanging for most of the book, which is also kind of true to life, isn't it? It was the British guy, G.K. Chesterton. He said this, the Iliad is great because all of life is a battle. The Odyssey, because all of life is a journey. And the book of Job, which is where we're zeroing in, the book of Job, because all of life is a riddle. All of life is a riddle. And that's kind of true, isn't it? Especially when we're in that space where life hurts. And it doesn't seem like we're going to be getting out of it anytime soon, where it's not one of those little scratches, it's some sort of really deep pain. And what we've got in those times is more riddles, more questions than we've got answers. And when you're in that space where you find that life hurts, you've got questions about how what you've believed about God can actually match with what you see happening in your life. I mean, that's where Job is through most of the book. He spends most of the book wrestling with those questions that life's throwing at him. And when you're in that space, when life hurts, you kind of drift to that same space, questioning and questioning and questioning and finding out that those tweetable sayings and little God quotes that people throw at you to try to be helpful really aren't. Now, if that's you, if that's where you are right now, I need you to understand this. That questioning doesn't mean that you don't have faith. Questioning doesn't mean that you don't have faith. In fact, what Job found out in about 42 chapters is that deep faith actually has a sublime sort of confidence that to ask deep and challenging questions of God isn't turning away from him. It's actually drawing toward him. Let me say that again. Asking those deep and challenging questions isn't turning away from God. It's actually turning toward him. So let's get into the story. Job chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. First line, first sentence of the book, chapter 1, verse 1. And what the author starts out telling us is, here's Job's character. Here's what Job is like. And that's really important because that's what all the questions in the book spin out of. The character of Job contrasted with the hurt and the pain in life that he's experiencing. Now, the author says that Job is blameless and upright. Now, that doesn't mean he's sinless. I mean, Job himself admits that he's not, that nobody is, but it does mean that Job is a person of integrity, or a person of character, a person of high morals, a person of honesty, a person that believers and non-believers alike acknowledge this is a good man, a good man who treats others with honesty and humility and compassion. That's what it means that he's blameless and upright. And when it says he feared God and turned away from evil, that means he's a believer. He loves God. He worships God. He serves God. He honors God. A believer who's actually putting into practice the things that God tells him to do. A believer who works at avoiding what God tells him is wrong. So, blameless and upright, feared God, turned away from evil. Believers and unbelievers alike acknowledge Job is a good man. He is one of the best around. And that short description sets up one of the big questions, probably the big question of the book. A question that Job kind of wrestles with for almost all 42 chapters. It's a question that believers still wrestle with today. The question, why do the righteous suffer? Why do the righteous suffer? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why does life hurt so much sometimes for people who love and trust and honor and follow God? You see, the question of suffering, it's a real problem for believers. I mean, the Bible tells us that God is totally good and loving. The Bible tells us that God is totally just and fair. It also tells us that God is totally powerful and almighty, and we want all those to be true. We need all those to be true, and in fact, they are true, but those truths, sometimes they don't match with our experience. And when life hurts for good people, we have a really hard time seeing how all those things can be true at the same time. I mean, here's our reasoning. We think if we're good and bad things happen, this must mean either that God isn't really just, because it's not fair that bad things happen to good people. In our scheme of fairness, right, according to our way of thinking, you're rewarded for doing good. Or we think, well, maybe God's good, but he's just not powerful enough to do something about this. Because he is good, and if he were strong enough to do something about this, he would. Otherwise, he wouldn't let all that bad and hurt and pain come into my life. Or we think, well, maybe God's all-powerful, but then he chooses not to stop this from happening. So that must mean he's really not all good and all loving. Or if he were, why would he let that pain come into my life? Understand the issues and the tensions? We want to believe certain things about God that the Bible tells us are true, but they don't seem to match with our experience or our reasoning. And that's where Job is for most of this book. As it all gets started in verse 6, if you're following along with me, where Satan, whose name means accuser, comes and challenges God. Let me read a little bit of that for you. Down in verse 6, one day members of the heavenly court came to present themselves before the Lord. And the accuser, Satan, came with them. Where have you come from? The Lord asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord, I've been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on. Then the Lord asked Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil. Satan replied to the Lord, yes, but Job has good reason to fear God. You have always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You have made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Now let me zero in on this discussion a little bit, this conversation between God and Satan. God knows what Satan's up to here. All right, because God, not only is God all loving and all powerful, God is also all knowing. And so God knows why Satan's there. God knows what Satan's seen. God knows that Satan's up to no good, that Satan's made it his business here to mess with God's world and his people, running around like a roaring lion, seeking who he might devour. So it's kind of interesting to me here that it's actually God who's the one who brings up Job. Almost as if God's kind of a lawyer leading Satan into a trap that Satan doesn't see coming. God says, Satan, well, have you considered Job? Job's a good man. Job loves me and serves me. And Satan says, he only serves you because you give him stuff. He only serves you because you've drawn up this system, God, where people will love you only as you give them good things. Only if they get something out of it. And God says, really? Let's see about that. Let's see about that, Satan. You think that's really true? You think both Job and I are so shallow and superficial? Well, you're wrong. So go ahead, test me in this. Test me. Okay, Satan, you can do whatever you want with Job's stuff. All right? Just don't hurt him. And that sets up another one of those big questions that the whole book of Job wrestles with, and that's this. Can God be loved just for himself, or is it only for his gifts? Can people really hold on to God for better or for worse, even when there are no benefits attached? So to prove that that's in fact the case, that God can be loved just for God, and not for all the stuff that he gives, God kind of turns Satan loose. Let me read verse 12. All right, you may test him, the Lord said to Satan. Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically. So Satan left the Lord's presence. And in verse 13 and following, then the very next sentence, Satan attacks. All right, evil is unleashed, and Job's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day begins. And in one day, he loses most of his stuff and all of his kids. It is amazing at the speed at which that happens. I mean, a messenger comes into Job and says, Job, there's been this catastrophe, and you've lost all this stuff. And before he can even look at a spreadsheet and calculate and say, well, I got this left, another messenger comes in and said, Job, got some bad news for you. You lost all this stuff. And then, before he can even say, well, yeah, the spreadsheet says I still have a little bit, I still have a bunch of stuff left, the next messenger comes in and says, Job, you lost this stuff. And then, before Job can even say, okay, the spreadsheet's blown up and I don't have much left of anything, but stuff is just stuff, and stuff can, you can come back from that. At least I've still got my family. Another messenger comes in and says, Job, got some really bad news. All your kids, they were throwing a feast, throwing a party, and they all got killed. Talk about a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, about life hurting as much as life can hurt, about when it raining, it monsooning. I mean, after that, what you'd expect, certainly what Satan expected, is that with all his stuff and all his kids wiped out in one day, that Job would be done with God. Except he's not. Job's devastated, he's crushed, he's broken, he's wounded, he's hurting, he's reeling, but he doesn't understand why all this is happening to him, but he still turns to God. And he turns to God not with a curse, but with worship. If you're following along, jump down to verse 20. Job stood up and tore his robe in grief and shaved his head. So there's all that world spinning out of control, grief and pain. And then he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother, and naked I will return. The Lord has given, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And through all this, Job did not sin or blame God for doing anything wrong. Job passes the first test. Despite everything that had happened, he still fears, loves, and trusts in God. Despite everything that happened, Job still doesn't curse God. He questions God, but he doesn't curse God, which is not only commendable to me, it's like amazing. I mean, I don't think that would be me in those sort of circumstances. What faith! What faith! And yet it's also Job's faith that causes him some of his pain. I mean, it's his faith that's actually going to cause the big struggle that goes on inside of him for most of the book. And he's going to have to keep fighting for his faith in the middle of stuff he doesn't really understand. You see, with that worship confession, what Job recognizes when he says, may the name of the Lord be praised, the Lord's given, the Lord's taken away, may the name of the Lord be praised. What he's saying is that God's hand is in everything. And if his faith acknowledges that God's hand is in everything, but Job also knows himself to be righteous, then in God's eyes, then how can Job escape the horrible thought that maybe God's doing something bad here? All right, that's kind of where his faith been there. Right? When life hurts that bad, it's really easy to drift into that space. And that's where Satan's trying to push Job, which is how chapter 2 opens up. Satan shows up again in the council of God, in the heavenly council, and he says again, hey, God, I've been walking around the earth, and I've been looking at things, and I've been seeing things. And down at verse 3, the Lord asks Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? He's the finest man in all the earth. He's blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil. He's maintained his integrity, even though you urged me to harm him without cause. And Satan replied to the Lord, "Skin for skin. A man will give up everything he has to save his life, but reach out and take away his health, and he will surely curse you to your face." Now, Satan's accusation here is that really Job only cares for himself. That losing all his stuff didn't really affect Job and didn't make him curse God because Job just cared for his own skin. And God was still protecting that. Take away his health, and Job's integrity, Satan says, is going to be history. I mean, which is really kind of a crazy accusation if you think about it. I mean, if you're not hurt by pretty much losing almost all the stuff that you have in one day, to lose all your kids, all of them, and all at one time, how could even the most selfish and self-centered and self-serving person not be cut to the core by that? But see, Satan doesn't just want to win an argument. Satan wants to inflict harm. That's always Satan's goal, to inflict as much hurt and pain and harm and suffering as he can. And so he makes that outrageous claim, which for some reason God doesn't even challenge. Down in verse 6, God says, "All right, do with him as you please, but spare his life." So Satan left the Lord's presence, and he struck Job with terrible boils from head to foot. And Job scraped his skin with a piece of broken pottery as he sat among the ashes. And here Job is, sitting alone, all his stuff gone, all his kids gone. And he's sitting alone in terrible, excruciating pain. He's got some shard of pottery as his itchy stick, and that's not giving him any relief. And he's sitting, it says here in the text, in the ashes, which is probably a reference to the garbage dump, the refuse dump outside of the city, which is probably Job's own commentary on what he thinks, what he feels his life has become. Kind of a miserable piece of human trash. Good for nothing more than to be thrown out with the other used up, unwanted, and discarded things. And as you're reading along, you're thinking, surely the reader thinks Satan's won the bet now. Surely when life hurts this much, Job's going to curse God. Surely with his wife coming and piling on and urging him to say, "Job, just curse God and die," he will. Or at least he's going to start railing about fairness, like you've been hearing me do about this whole CARES Act thing, but that's not how this story ends. That's not how the story ends. Job's lonely, he's miserable, he's hurting, he's in pain, he's lost everything. Life hurts as much as it can hurt. Let me take you down to the end of verse 10. Through all this, Job's lips did not utter one sinful word. Through all this, Job's lips did not utter one sinful word. Now, that's not to say there aren't challenges to his faith. There are. And that's not to say that Job doesn't have all sorts of questions for God. He does. But Job doesn't curse God, but the challenge is now all his human relationships are broken. All his stuff is gone. His life hurts as bad as it can, and he's still got that nagging question of faith, because remember, he knows and everybody knows and God knows that Job is blameless and upright, right? A man of integrity. And so the question is what? If that's what Job is, then why do the righteous suffer? Why does life hurt for good people? It just doesn't seem to match with what he knows and believes about God and what he knows about himself. pretty much the whole rest of the book of Job is kind of him working his way through those questions and contradictions between what he believes and what the reality of his life is. And we're going to let those questions play out. Not just going to drop tweets and answers into you right today, because right, that's how life works, doesn't it? Right? Tweets rarely answer anything, even if they're true. Both finding faith and fighting for your faith is a process. A process that takes a little bit of time to work through. So, over the next couple of weeks, let's work through that together. Part of that work is checking in weekly for the next installment, the next section of Job that we're going to be looking through. Because again, as I said, this unfolds as a process, and it'll really help us to work through the whole process and see how Job ends up where he does. Okay, the second thing is to do some extra reading. We're going to cover big sections sometimes, and so to do some reading in that whole section of Job outside of just the verses we talk about on Sunday will help you get the whole context. And then the third thing is to get in a Zoom group. Get in a Zoom group on Job. What we're going to do is get in small groups of people who are going to talk over Zoom and discuss and share some of the different questions raised in this part of the message and talk about some Bible that applies to that. And there's a link in the description of this video. So when this is all done, go back and click on that link right away, and that link will take you right to a sign-up page. Get in the Zoom group so that we can keep talking about Job. Now, today we just got started. We just got started at the beginning of Job's story and kind of laid out that foundation. But before we finish up in chapter 1 and 2, I want to circle back and show you a couple of things that the author wants you to see that Job and his friends don't see yet. But the author does, and he wants us to be able to see it, because these are deep bedrock truths that are really going to help you through those times in your own life when life hurts and you got all these questions spinning in your head. Okay, here's the first bedrock truth. We rarely, and I would go so far as to say we never see the whole picture. We never know everything that's going on. I mean, there's no evidence here in the text at all that Job and his friends ever know of this wager between Satan and God. All he knows is that this stuff is happening to him and that his life hurts really, really bad, and he's not sure why. But the author wants us to know that this is going on because while it's hard for us to know that we might not know all the answers, sometimes when I'm struggling with what seems to me to be the unfairness of stuff, it helps me to remember this truth that maybe I don't see everything. That maybe there's something else going on at the God management level, which is way above mine and way more than I can see and know and understand. That maybe something's going on that God is working and working out toward my good. That's the first big point. The second one is this, that Satan has limits. Right? Satan has limits. Right? He's strong, he's powerful, he's nasty. He makes his life's purpose to sow hurt and pain and destruction and discord all over the place. But he can only go as far as God says he can go. What you see in chapter 1 here? Chapter 1, God said to Job, you can do this, but you can't touch Job. And then chapter 2, Satan comes back and asks God to do some more. And God says, okay, you can do that, but you can't take his life. In other words, Satan, this is how far your leash is. This far, no farther. Now, why God gives Satan a leash at all? And why, in this case, that leash is so darn long? I can't answer that. That's one of those unanswerable questions, and those unanswerable questions really bother us because especially when we're hurting, we just want the answers for everything. But here's what helps me. It helps me when my life's hurting to know that Satan has limits, to know that he's not all-powerful, to know that there's actually a line that God says, Satan, this line you may not cross. This far and no farther. And that's truth. So, I don't see the whole picture. Satan has limits. And this is probably the most important and profoundest truth of all. God here has confidence in Job. God's not sending this as a punishment on Job. He's allowing this to happen because he has confidence that Job's up to it. He has confidence in Job's faith. He has confidence that Job is up to the test. And he has confidence that he himself, in fact, he knows that he himself is going to be there to help Job through all this mess. And that's why God says, not once but twice, to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Because God knows that Job is up to it. And God knows that he himself is going to be there to help Job through it. Now, Job doesn't see that at the time, especially when all the hurt and the pain is just piling up and piling up and piling up. But God, again, has confidence in Job. And God has confidence that Job's going to make it through whatever Satan can dish out. Yes, Job's going to have a lot of questions. Yes, Job's going to have some doubts that what he believes about God and what he sees happening in his life kind of match up. Yes, Job's going to have some up and downs of faith, but God also knows that Job is going to fight for his faith. God knows that Job is going to fight for his faith, and God knows that he himself isn't going to be put off or pushed away by Job's rants and raves and questions. God knows that Job's questions are actually going to help Job fight for his faith, and actually going to help him in the end to draw closer to God, not push him farther away. And God knows that, yes, he is going to be there for Job in this mess, even when Job can't see him or feel him or even sense him a little bit. God knows all of this. And so, in fact, God allows himself to be put on trial. To be put on trial, as it were, to be tested so that we can see some things about God that we might not see any other way. And that's so Job and can find some things out, and we can find some things about fighting for faith that we wouldn't see any other way. That's the amazing nature of the heart and the mind and the wisdom of God. We can't figure out his ways, but we can know that he is with us and that he is for us. And because God has confidence in Job, I think it's the same God yesterday, today, and forever. And so the same God has the same truths about God that are the same yesterday, today, and forever. That God made us, that God loves us, that God is for us, that God is with us, even when things are really, really hard, even when things really, really hurt. I think maybe especially when things really, really hurt. And so, even though I don't understand it all, and even though this is not in the text, I kind of believe that the Holy Spirit is there with Job, right then, praying for him, praying with him, praying for him in those words that cries that words can't express. And I got to believe here that God is silently supporting Job, even though Job doesn't see him or sense him or even feel that he's anywhere close to this really messy situation, that God's there in the mess, in the hurt, in the pain, just like Jesus was on the cross. And I got to believe that while Satan wants all this hurt and pain to drive Job away from God, that God was providing a way through for Job, that God was providing a way out of the temptation, and that this far and no farther means that Job's going to be able to find a way through, and that God's going to be there to help guide him, to help show him the way, to help lead him through, not only to survive this, But in fighting for his faith, to discover that even though some questions can't be answered, that God is still there. And that God is still loving him and helping him through, even when he hurts really, really bad. I invite you to join me the rest of the way through Job, so you can discover that for yourself. The next step this week is to click on that link and get in one of those Zoom groups. Next week, we're going to come back and see the next part of Job's story, a really short section of chapter 2, as Job's friends show up. And through what goes on with Job's friends, what we're going to learn is some things about how to help other people when their life really, really hurts. Hope you join me for that. Right now, let's do what we've been doing these last weeks and spend some extended time praying, especially about these needs in a COVID-19 world. Let's pray. O Lord God, our Heavenly Father, you are fair and just. You are powerful and almighty. You are gracious and good, and we don't always see that. We want to believe it, and we know it's true. Help us to trust that. Help us to trust that even when we don't see it, and even when our life confuses us, even when we're really, really hurting. Help us to trust you. Help us in those uncertain times to wait with hope and to keep working that process that can help us fight for our joy and fight for our faith, even in troubling times. Help us to keep focusing on you. Help us to turn to your word. Help us to keep coming to you in prayer to give us the strength and encouragement that we need. God, we come before you with some specific needs right now. Again, we ask you, as we have all these weeks, about the CARES Act. We ask that you remove all the obstacles to us receiving those CARES Act funds, and that we receive them quickly. Not only us, but a bunch of other churches and small businesses, both in and outside of our congregation and in our community, and people we know and people we don't, small businesses that have yet to see any of those funds. Lord, we pray that you'd release them, remove the obstacles, and help us and others to quickly receive the funds that are needed, for us especially to care for the needs of our staff, especially our teachers. And Lord, for those that have abused the system at the expense of others, we ask that in your time your justice would come. We do ask for guidance for our leaders. Help them to make the right calls at the right time to handle the situation. We continue to ask that the church, your body throughout the world, would be a worldwide leader in helping others, in being light in the darkness. For our church, Concordia, that we would find ways to be a beacon of light and an agent for good for the most vulnerable in our community and in our own church and school community as well. Continue to give our church staff and leaders everything we need for the task at hand: wisdom, strength, discernment, energy, creativity, calmness, peace, and rest. Lord, we thank you that you've shown us some ways to connect at a time even when we're pulled apart. We continue to pray for those who are working at those things, that you thank you for their efforts and continue to help the connection things that we do. We pray for the Zoom groups on Job that are starting. Lord, use those as powerful tools to connect people with each other and for your Spirit to be working in our lives. God, as people have been doing those things and making some connections, there have been many needs that have surfaced. And Lord, you know what they are. We take a moment to lift those up before you right now in silence, so that all together that are on worshiping at the same time can support each other in prayer. Lord, we ask you to provide financial relief and stability for everyone affected by this, people and businesses. For all those on the front lines, we ask that you give them safety, For people who've been brought low and suffering from fear or depression or discouragement, let the light of your presence shine in those dark places. Boldly again, God, we seek your miracles. We seek your mercy on behalf of the world. Lord, that you stop this virus and that you help people affected by it make a full and complete recovery. Lord, in this time when we need you more than ever, we ask that you would turn people's hearts toward you. Lord, all these things we bring before you and we trust to your mercy in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right, everybody, before you go, we've got one more activity for you. This is another one of those Bible verse activities where on the screen you're going to see several blanks, and as time goes on, those blanks are going to get filled in with letters. Now, my challenge to you is to see who in your group can guess what the Bible verse says first. All right, you guys are going to see that now. What a wonderful Bible verse that is, and what a wonderful promise we have in it, that God is with us wherever we go. And that's how Pastor was leading out of this message, that he knows that God was with Job. And we know that God is with us. So no matter how frightened we get, no matter how worried we get, no matter how much is going on that we just can't quite explain, we have that promise that God is with us wherever we go. Have a great day, everybody.
Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Freedom conquers, all our chains undone. Sin defeated, Jesus has overcome. Triumphed when the third day dawned. Darkness shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done.
Thanks for joining us for worship and the beginning of the book study on the book of Job. Join us on Zoom this week to dig a little deeper into the questions raised today and discuss them with others. Zoom groups start this week. Go to our website, www.concordiachurch.com, and click on the tab that says Sign-ups. On the drop-down menu, choose Zoom groups and see the groups offered. Sign up there, and your host will contact you right away. See you there. Welcome to Concordia Church today. We're glad you're here. If this is your first time joining us, text the word New Online to 619-493-4001 so we can welcome you. Concordia loves to pray with and for you. Please text the word prayer to the same number, 619-493-4001, along with your prayer request, and we'll get right on it.